Hey, Matt Allington here. So as you probably know, I do a lot of blogging. I like sharing the things that I've learned on my website. I also do a lot of work helping people on forums with their questions. And sometimes it's an easy answer to a forum question and sometimes it's a little bit harder. And today I'm going to talk about a problem that's a little bit harder. And so instead of trying to write a response to this forum question, I've decided to make a video and make it available on the YouTube channel. Now, as always, this is always about the process, right? So I haven't prepared this. I'm just going to go through it. I'm going to try not to edit this video and just show you the process that I go through to try and solve a problem. Okay, so here is the original forum question which prompted my video. And so this is from Kevin. He's in the Netherlands. And what he's trying to do is do some reporting on people who have been away from work for more than 90 days. So sort of long-term sickness reporting, if you like. I'll include the link in the video and you can go and read this article yourself if you like. But basically the approach he was taking was to put a column in his data table that said a 1 if they'd been away for more than 9 months and then a 0 otherwise. And then he was going to use that column to add up the number of people that have been away from that point in time. But that approach has got some issues. And the first issue is that there's a date column in this data. So let me show you the data. So here's the data, and there's a date column here. You can see the column that Kevin created, which has got the 9 months plus flag. So this one does have someone who's been away for more than 9 months. In fact, they started their illness on this day and they still haven't recovered. So they've ticked over the 9-month period. But the problem with this approach is that you would normally join this column, column B, against a calendar table, and the calendar table will filter the data table. And with that in mind, what you're not able to do then is solve this problem where you try and produce this chart. Because what a chart does is it puts a filter, in this case, on year. So when you put a chart, the axis is filtering your calendar table by year. We're therefore actually filtering only the staff members that had their first sick day in 2017. Then the 90-day column kicks in and tells us how many of the people who started their illness in 2017 had more than 90 days. But that's not the requirement. The requirement is how many people took leave in 2017 that was more than 90 days, and then how many people are still on leave in 2018 and still on leave in 2019, and so on. Now, I'm actually not 100% clear here whether they have to take 90 days leave in each year to qualify, or whether if they've had an accumulated total of at least 90 days, then they qualify. I'm going to assume the latter, because to me this seems to be all about long-term sickness reporting. So it actually doesn't matter whether they've had more than 90 days in a single year or not. Okay, so that's the background. Kevin sent me some data. It's really important that you have good representative test data when you do these formulas. If you don't have this good test data, you will most likely make errors in your formulas, and then when you come back and later on get some real data, you won't know what's going on. So with that in mind, I'm going to load this up into Power BI Desktop, which is my tool of choice. All right, now to save a bit of time, I've already connected to this data source, the Excel file, and here I am inside Power Query for Power BI Desktop. So I connected to the source, I drilled down onto this table, and I changed the type. Also notice that the table in the source is called Table 1, and I've renamed my query to be data. Please don't leave your tables called things like Table 1 or Data Extract Date or something like that. Okay, the other thing that I should do before moving on here is notice how these two columns have been detected as date time, and it's much better practice just to give the date only, particularly if you're going to join these up to a calendar table. We're not going to do that in this case, but it's still good practice to do that. Now look, there's various different ways you can handle this recovery date. So what you could do is you could fill the nulls with a date like 9/9/9999, basically just to say that it's a long time in the future, or you can handle it within your formulas using a null. I think I'll leave it like that for now. I've been thinking about this 9+ formula since I just did that intro, and I actually think it makes sense to keep this 9 months plus calculation. So presumably Kevin's done this calculation somewhere else. Of course, you could do it as a calculated column just by subtracting these two dates and getting the dates between. All right, so let's go ahead and close and apply. We'll get this data loaded up into Power BI. Now, the second thing is I need a calendar table. Now, there's various ways of doing a calendar table, and I prefer to use my calendar table that I've developed in Power Query. So if you come to my website and just search for calendar table, you'll find this article about, this is an overview of calendar tables, but I actually want this one, build a reusable calendar table with Power Query. You can read this article, you can learn how to build your own calendar table. It's a pretty good instructional guide. And if you come all the way down, you'll see that I actually have the code for a calendar table here. This one's got a little bit of extra stuff in it that I don't want to use in this case, including a financial year. So what I tend to do is I tend to store this text file, or my version of the calendar table text file, in OneNote, and then I can just cut and paste it when I need. And so here I am in OneNote. This is where I keep my calendar table. I just come in and copy this, Control-C, and from there I'll go back. I need to go back into Power Query, so transform data, and I just go new source, new query, blank query, and switch over to the advanced editor and just paste that code in here. All right, now my calendar table, I can hard code a start date here, and this duration is calculated based on today's date. And so, to make this a little bit more dynamic, what I would really need to do is get the first date of my illness and start my calendar at that point in time. Now in this case, I'm just going to simplify things. I'm just going to sort this data. So it's the 9th of September 2016. So I'm just going to hard code my calendar table on 2016. So you should start your calendar tables at the start of the year. And today's date is this one, and therefore the duration takes me through 1905 days. It's actually better practice, instead of taking it through to today's date, to taking it through to the end of the year. And so I could just do a little bit of custom encode here. I think there's something like date end of year or something like that. Now you've got to be a little bit careful with the IntelliSense here. So I don't want to, if I hit tab now, I'm going to lose this code. And so the IntelliSense is not perfect. And so my tip is, if you're going to wrap a new function around an existing function in your UI, you should open the brackets and then go for it. So date, end of year, hit tab, and now I need to close the brackets. So that takes me through to the end of the current year, 21, and now my duration has been extended through to 2192 days, and this is my calendar. And once I've done that, I should be pretty much ready to go, so close and apply. All right, so let's go over and have a look at the data model. Let me show you one of the problems. So I've got this first day of sickness. If I join that to my calendar table, this is the problem that I explained in the intro. So I could come here, I could create a chart, I could bring the calendar year onto the axis, and I'll just do an implicit measure. If I did something like just dragging this on the values, then this basically gives me the answer that Kevin had. So basically, this is telling me by year how many people with 9 months or more sickness started their sickness in that year, and that's not what we want. Look, while I'm here, just a little bonus tip. Notice that this column here, these columns in my calendar table have a sigma. That's because they're numeric columns. Numeric columns will always be treated as numbers, and that's why I'm getting this data format like this. Clearly that's inappropriate. There is a quick way to fix these. The slow way, click on the year column, come up and change this to a whole number, or set it to do not aggregate. The other thing that you can do is you switch over to this view. It's not intuitive. come over to the calendar table. You can select all of the columns. I thought you could do it there, maybe not. You can certainly do it over here. Select columns. Once you've selected the columns, come down. Let's change the down here to change summarized by none. So what I'm going to do is pick a couple of these numeric columns and change the data type to be whole number, and I'm going to change the format to be 0 decimal places with no thousands separator. Once I've done that, if I come back here, that solves that problem. So if you need to make multiple changes to multiple columns all at once, you do that from this model view. It's not intuitive. Okay, so let's go about solving this problem. The problem we've got is that this relationship is our enemy. So let me get rid of that relationship. I'll delete that. We've solved that problem where the relationship is our enemy, but of course we have a new problem now because our calendar table is not filtering the data table. And so this is where DAX comes in. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to attempt to write a DAX formula that will take the filter coming from the calendar table and push it onto my data table so that it can operate over more than one column. Now, I would never attempt to write a DAX formula like this. What I would always do is turn it into a visual where I can see the numbers. It's just easier to deal with. The other thing that I recommend to do is to try and simulate the formula that you're trying to build inside the data view before actually writing the formula. So let me show you what I mean. So how would I go about finding out how many people have had 9 months or more off work during the year 2017? What I need to do is I need to filter my data table so that it only includes people that had at least 1 day off in 2017, right? So let's go ahead and do that in the data view. So here's the data table, and I've got this illness date, recovery date here. Some people don't have, let's just sort this to make sure that we've got it. Some people don't have a recovery date, and I'm actually going to sort this by the first date. So, and let me go all the way to the top. All right, so this is the column that tells me 9 months. So how would I filter this table just using these two filters at the top so that it only includes people that had at least 1 day sick in 2017? All right, so to have had at least 1 day sick, they have to have recovered after the 1st of January 2017. Right, so that they were still sick on or after the 1st of January. So I need to go date filter is after. You can't select on or after from that dialog, but you can do it afterwards. Is on or after 1st of January 2017. All right, so this will filter my table. So I've only got people that were sick on or after the 1st of January 2017. Now, the second thing is they actually had to have started their sickness before the 31st of December 2017. Otherwise, because at the moment this is giving me people that recovered in 2020. Let me see if I can find an example to show you what I mean. So I'm going to just filter on people that haven't been sick long term. And I've sorted the recovery date column. So if I scroll down now, so if you take a look at this particular person here, this person recovered on the 23rd of May, which is after the start of January 2017, but they didn't get sick until May 2019. So clearly we don't want to include these people in this particular calculation for the year 2017. So I need two filters. I need one that says this person has recovered with this custom filter. This person has recovered on or after the 1st of January 2017. But we also have to check that their sickness was on or before the 31st of December 2017. It's actually quite hard to get your head around this logic but it's so much easier if you actually do it here. So is on or after. They had to have been sick. In fact, it's not on or after, it's on or before the 31st of December 2017. Now that I've got these filters applied, let me clear this one. Now I've got a list of people that had at least some sickness during the calendar year of 2017. So their sickness started, or they were still sick on one of those days in 2017. And if I had these filters applied, then I could do a count of the 9 month sickness and it would give me what I want. And so the trick now is to convert these two formulas that I have in here into a DAX formula. So just to make that a little bit easier for myself, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here and I'm going to use my screen snipping tool. So I'm going to screen snip that. I actually use this product called Fastone Capture. There's other tools out there. I particularly like this one. And then, so that's one of the filters, and the other filter is this one here. Where's my screen capture? I'm going to take another capture of this one. Okay, and now I've got the two together, and with this tool I can actually combine them into a single image, and in this case I'll put them vertically. And so now I've got the two filters that I need inside my DAX formula to be able to create this table. Now just keep in mind that when I create a filtered table like this, it has no impact on the actual results. This is just for debugging purposes, and this is a great example of how you could do this to learn how to write your formula. Alright, so let's get into it. So I'm going to come back here, and the first thing I want to do is I want to build this table. So let me go ahead, I'm going to write a test measure, and I'm going to build this measure from the inside out. So let's think about it. How do I go about writing this formula? Well, one thing I'm going to need for sure is I'm going to need the start date and the end date of the period that I'm interested in. So in the hard-coded example I used, it was 2017, but I need this to work for 2019 as well. So I don't want to hard-code these dates, right? What I need to do is I need to be able to extract those dates inside my measure. So that's how I'm going to start. So let me come over here, and so I'll just call it measure. So here we go. So I'll use some variables. Variables make it very easy to test. And so my first variable is, let's call it the start of year. Give your variables good descriptive names, and it will be the minimum of the calendar date. And let me return start of year. Interesting, it's giving me IntelliSense. That seems to suggest that it's a reserved word. Yes. Let me call it my start of year. That old trick. And let's have a look at that, and I'll put this measure into my visual. And there we have it. I'm correctly grabbing the first date of the year. So of course I can now repeat this process to get the end of the year and my end of year, and this will be max of course, and this will be my end of year. Notice how I'm testing each of my variables before I progress, just to make sure that it's working as I've intended. Okay, so 31st of December. Alright, so that's stage one. Let me bring back my screenshot here. So what I need to do is I need to filter my data table, and I only want to keep the records that have a recovery date on or after start of year. So let me have a go at that. So I'm now going to create a table. Now when you create a table, you can assign tables to variables as well. So I'll go variable, call it my filtered table. And so I'm going to filter the data table. And what filter do I want to apply? Well, if I go back to my notes, it needs to be the recovery date has to be on or after the first date of the year, which is my start of year. Okay, so this returns a table containing the number of data records that had someone on leave that was after the start of the year. Now, if I try and put this table into my measure, it's going to throw an error. You cannot put a table as a measure. But for testing, what I could do is just simply count how many rows there are in my table. This is a great way to test your measures during this authoring process. And so now I can tell that there are 10,000 people that had a recovery date on or after the 1st of January 2016, and same for 17 and 18. But of course that doesn't solve my problem, because if I bring back my formula, this only solves half of the problem. I need this filter as well. So let me go ahead and add that as a filter. Now with a filter function, you're only allowed to have a single filter. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put a double ampersand, which is and then the second filter is going to be the illness first date has to be on or before, so less than or equal to, and it's the end of year, so that's my end of year. So let's go ahead and see what that does. Now, this gives me 2090 for a sense check. Let's go back for 2017. With those two filters applied, notice I'm getting 2090. So notice how I'm able to validate my business logic as I progress. So that certainly seems to be working for me. So now I want to know how many of these people have had a total sickness length of 9 months or more. So if I filter this, interesting, I've got lots of different zeros here. Let's say number filter equals 1. That looks like a bug to me. I've got 287 people that are in that state during 2017. So I now need to do this inside my DAX formula. Well, I can have another filter here. So I could say double ampersand, I need the 9 plus months has to be equal to 1. And let's check that. There we have it. 287 is correct. Alright, so that's the number of people that have been sick during that year. And now that I think about it, that's it. The problem's solved, even with my little test measure. So when I'm writing variables, I do like to do a final variable, var result equals, and then return result. The reason I do this is that later on, if I come back and want to test one of my other interim variables, then it's very easy to come back and replace result with one of these other variables, and I can do some testing. I think that's it. So let's get rid of this 9 months and turn this back into a column chart. I'm pretty sure that's right. There could be one more thing. What about these people that haven't returned yet? I wonder whether they're being included. So let's come back and have a look. Well, we've certainly got the 9 months filter here, but what would happen if the recovery date is blank? Well, I think it's going to work, but frankly the easiest way to test it, I think, is I'm going to go back and use that other technique that I talked about earliest in the video. So I'm just going to replace these recovery dates, and I'm going to do a replace values. So I want to find null and replace it with an arbitrary date in the future. So I know that if I have a date in the future, if I get the same results, then I know my formula is working. So let's just pick one of these dates, maybe this one here. In fact, let me switch this back for testing purposes. Come back here. Let's do my little test. So this is the before. And let me now come here, close and apply. Fingers crossed. There's a little bit of fingers crossed. This to me is just the easiest way to test if it's working. If the numbers don't change, then my formula is working as is. If they do change, then at least the fix that I've put in place has fixed it, but I could delete that step if the numbers don't change. The numbers did change, which is very interesting. So let's come back here. So you can see my numbers did change. So by putting that arbitrary date into the future, I'm able to use the filters without having to write any more complex logic about establishing whether someone who has a blank should or shouldn't be included.